Welcome back, baseball family, to another episode of Ball Talk with the Baseball Together podcast. I'm Brig. Here's Brad. We're really excited that you're here with us. We don't want to take too much time before we get you to the interview that we had with Aaron Fischman. It was absolutely fantastic. Aaron is the author of a Baseball Gaijin, Chasing a Dream to Japan and Back, which tells the story of Tony Barnette. Aaron Fischman is a journalist. In fact, he's an award-winning journalist. He's earned 2 Los Angeles Press Club awards, and his career has been fascinating, and we're going to get into that a little bit in the interview. We hope you enjoy it as much as we did. Welcome back, baseball family. We are here with another one of our episodes of Ball Talk. We have a great interview guest here with us. His name's Aaron Fischman, and we'll give you his bio and everything like that in just a moment, but he's author of a Baseball Gaijin, Chasing a Dream to Japan and Back. We've got our copies right here, but as always, before we do anything, we got to get him caught in a rundown. Aaron, are you ready?
I think so. I'm not sure.
Okay. Our first question we ask everybody is, what is your quest?
My quest in life? It's just open-ended purposely, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to tell amazing, worthwhile stories and have a lot of fun in the process and not get too anxious, but that's way easier said than done.
For sure. It is way easier said than done.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, the hardest hitting question. What is your favorite color?
Green. Purple or
I can
green?
see.
I have these nice green headphones on, as you could see if you're watching on YouTube. Purple, green and purple are my 2 favorite colors. Yeah.
Purple's one of mine, for the record.
Nice.
That's very cool.
Nice.
Next question. If the LA Dodgers were a beverage, what would they be?
Whoa. Really putting me on the spot here with that one. Was it horchata?
Oh, yeah.
That's a good one. I think you're spot on with that.
Yeah, yeah. I don't even think I need to elaborate. I can if you want. But
no, that's perfect. That's a great answer. Perfect. I would never.
If anybody's ever had horchata, they'll understand.
Yeah,
it's a lot. It's a lot. It's
baseball,
very sweet. Sometimes burns out a little bit in the postseason, but
it does.
Right. If Clayton Kershaw's name is on the cup, then yeah, we're probably gonna have a problem.
Well, and sometimes it gets a little watered down there at the end, right? So yeah,
yeah, good point.
It works. If baseball was an ice cream flavor, what would it be?
I'm gonna go with coffee ice cream. So it's kind of straightforward. Some people might say it's a little bit boring, but there's just so much flavor. There's so much nuance, and if you know, you know. And I think the 3 of us know.
We know. Yeah. Awesome. My last question for you, and then Brad's got one more. What is one unpopular baseball opinion you have?
I don't know how unpopular it is now, but I've come around on this. But I like the extra inning rule with the runner on second base, just because it's just such a long season. I don't want such long games. I think we see enough games and innings as it is, and yeah, it sucks for the relief pitcher. There's barely any margin for error. You come in, there's already a runner in scoring position. If they bunt the runner over, then they're at third with 1 out. But just be better. No, I'm just kidding. But no, it's
really though. Yeah.
I mean, so I've come, even though I did not like it at first. Like a lot of people don't love change, especially when we're so used to certain traditions. But I like it now.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I understand that because I'm not a big fan of it because I feel like I've missed something right? But I understand the purpose behind it. I understand the nuance, and I would like to see more teams bunt that guy over. But bunting is such a lost art that nobody will do it.
They've got to employ the Japanese strategy. There's not enough small ball over here. It's always let's get a double or 3-run home run or whatever.
I know.
Preach, man.
It's crazy.
Preach. That's we talk small ball all the time.
Actually, I went to the only Dodgers game that I've been to all year. It was Japanese Heritage Night, interestingly enough, and Shohei had a good game as usual. But it was Dodgers Diamondbacks, and the Diamondbacks were bunting in strategic situations, and it was working out for them. And then the Dodgers ended up bunting, and it ended up really working for them. And I was with my dad. We were joking about how Dave Roberts really should bunt this guy over here, but he probably won't. And we were relieved when he did. And the runner, I believe, was singled in after he was moved over to second base. It made a lot of sense too. It was forgot who it was, but it was someone, might have been Kike Hernandez or one of the Dodgers hitters that's been struggling this season, and there were no outs, and they were down by a run. So we were relieved to see them move him into scoring position there.
That's cool.
Yeah, and we need to see more of it. I feel like we've seen more bunts in the last 2 to 3 weeks than we have in the last 2 to 3 years, which is encouraging. But anyway. But the last question we have for you of this is the question I like to ask everybody is, do you think Babe Ruth is overly romanticized? Not overrated, overly romanticized.
It could go either way. I lean toward yes, just because I think that's the natural thing that we do in our culture. Maybe it's just a natural human thing when something happened so long ago, and it's less tangible. We tell legends and we exaggerate, and that makes things more epic. He was extremely epic. I don't know if I can cuss. I was going to say something else, but extremely epic. But I don't know that he was as epic as we romanticize him to be. The level of competition wasn't what it was, of course. Now he wasn't facing 100-mile-per-hour pitches. So I'm going to say yes, barely.
Barely.
No disrespect.
Suitable answer.
I don't want to disrespect the man.
He changed the game, but
he was pretty darn good.
Yeah, that's
I think
Shohei
Shohei can do what he could do.
I think
that's
Shohei's
amazing.
Better.
Shohei's, it's crazy.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's take a quick break. When we get back, we're going to get into the book, A Baseball Gaijin by Aaron Fischman. Welcome back, baseball family. Again, we have Aaron Fischman with us, the author of A Baseball Gaijin, Chasing a Dream to Japan and Back. This is a fantastic book. Go pick it up, and we're going to talk about it so you can learn more about it and understand some context. Aaron, my first question for you is, why was Tony the subject of the book? Why'd you choose him over other guys who have made the jump?
So I've had the pleasure of being in touch with him for over 15 years now. I think over 16 now. Yeah, over 16. So he was not in Japan. His story was nowhere near as fascinating when I first got in touch with him. So I was an undergraduate at UC Davis, not that far from Sacramento. And I was writing for a small independent sports website called davissportsdeli.com. There wasn't actually a delicatessen. It was deli themed. Grilled cheese in our interviews they were called grilled cheese interviews. There were other things that I don't even remember. It was French fries, sandwiches, it's different things. But anyway, so I blindly reached out to, just like a cold call, but via Facebook, various AA pitchers I knew nothing about other than they had good K to walk ratios and they logged a lot of innings. He was the only person who responded and agreed. and those were transcript interviews. This was kind of the early days of social media, and he wanted to talk. I wanted to talk with him. Did a couple of those. We had a podcast that he came on to a couple times. Then, not much more than about a year later, he started blogging for us. So going into his AAA season with the Diamondbacks organization, he blogged about his first spring camp where he crossed paths with Randy Johnson, which I thought was pretty cool. And then within a year of that, he was already in Japan. And so he was blogging for us there, and was there during the earthquake and tsunami in 2011, which takes up a couple chapters in the middle of the book, which were really important for me to write about. But his story got progressively more interesting. He's just such a fascinating, charismatic, engaging guy, brutally honest at times, as you probably could tell from the book with some of his quotes. Dry sense of humor, funny guy, really intense about a lot of things, passionate, but just such a dream interview guest. And I had the pleasure of speaking with him so many times over the years and got access to his inner circle, his wife, his friends, his parents, teammates, everything really. And it was such a joy to do. I could go into even more detail, but I'll basically say that in grad school, then I was doing various versions of the story. That's where I got members of the inner circle involved, where it wasn't just speaking to him, but still it was just a long form, basically like a magazine article where it was 1,500 words for one class, 3,000 for another, but nowhere near the near 1,000 word story that this book became. And that was about 3 years after those grad school projects, when he was about to start his rookie season with the Rangers. Because as fascinating as his story was, it didn't seem marketable in the US until he had returned to North America and actually fulfilled his dream of making that major league debut. And so when the Rangers afforded him that opportunity, I knew I had to turn it into a book. And thankfully he was excited to do it and quickly agreed. And we got started, and it was a long process and challenging at times, but just so rewarding to do.
That's really cool. We've both really enjoyed the story, and your narrative
Thanks so
style.
much.
Yeah, your narrative style is so accessible. It's super well written, and it feels informative, casual, conversational, but you have so much authority behind it at the same time. So
That's a
the
really nice
balance,
compliment. I appreciate that.
you're welcome. Yeah, the balance you've struck is wonderful. I wanted to point out the bullet points. So at the end of every chapter, there are these little like footnotes, bullet points,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
those are some of my favorite parts. So
I
just to
love
let our
nerding out
baseball,
with those.
right?
Yeah.
It's
I
Those are
bet
fun.
you
chapter
I
did.
love
end.
it.
Thank you. Those are chapter end notes. And so
Yeah,
I originally had them as footnotes where they were on the bottom of the pages. And I'm interested to hear your thoughts. We're really getting into
yeah.
the weeds here. But my publisher and the editor and the publisher, they thought it would be a little bit too distracting. And for the more casual reader, it might be best at the end of the chapters or the end of the book. I definitely didn't want it at the end of the book because you would
No.
have to
Right.
wait so long to flip all the way back. But I deferred to them and I said, okay, yeah, let's do it at the end of the chapters. So I don't know.
So I
Yes.
loved having it at the end of the chapter. I thought that was great. I could see them as footnotes. That would totally
Mhm.
have worked well. But
That would have worked for us nerds. I don't know
yes,
how
nerds.
many nerds are around.
So I was telling Brad, I said, "Man, these notes at the back feel like that you're having a conversation with an expert." And they go, "Okay, can I tell you something else? Like, okay, we've
Yeah.
had this conversation. I've told you the story, but here's the thing you didn't know." And that's how they
Mhm.
sound, as like these behind the
It's kind of like an
scenes little
aside, yeah.
insights. Yeah, I loved it.
And
Yeah.
That
that
was
was one of the things I wanted to ask you about those too, because I mean, going through and reading those, I was like, this guy has a basketball podcast. He has to have read the book of basketball, but by Bill Simmons. Have you read that book?
Not in its entirety, to be honest.
Okay,
I've kind
It's
of
but
flipped
huge. Yeah.
around.
okay,
Yeah,
but yeah, like the tone of those notes had a lot of the same tone as the footnotes, and the
interesting.
footnotes
Mhm.
in that book are some of my favorite parts. Like,
Okay,
there's a lot of
cool.
really
Yeah.
great dense information, but the footnotes are fantastic,
Mhm.
and the notes here had the same tone, and it was really
Hmm.
way more entertaining to read them the way that you wrote them than it was to just be like, "Oh, by the way, this happened, this happened, this happened." It was like Brig said, it's like, "Hey, check this out. A little bit of
Yeah.
insider information."
Thanks,
Yeah.
guys.
And
I'm glad that had that effect, and I've been doing a number of interviews lately, and we haven't talked about those end notes yet. So I
That's
love that.
bizarre because these are fabulous.
yeah,
Thank
it's
you.
great.
Thanks
Like,
so much.
this is the kind of stuff that I like to read when I'm reading nonfiction, is the extra stuff,
Yeah.
and I'm glad that you included it in there. But so you've been in touch with Tony for a long time. How long did it take you to actually put together this book from the day that you were like, I got this book that I want to put together, until the day it was like submitted off to the publisher?
It's a little bit misleading because there were some parts of the process where I was reaching out to prospective agents and publishers, and I never did end up signing with an agent, but for better or worse. But so there was a time where I wasn't actually working on the content of the book or actively interviewing more people or researching much, where I was maybe just updating things, fact checking a little bit, but it was most of my energy was dedicated to outreach, agent and publisher outreach. But that was still before I got the deal with the publisher. But so as I mentioned, so he signed with the Rangers in late 2015, and early 2016 was when I approached him with the idea. But we had already been talking for a long time by then. Um,
Yeah.
but so you could say so. Late 2022 was when the deal was officially signed. That was Halloween, I remember 2022, and my manuscript was submitted June 1st of 2023. So really long period of time. I wasn't working on it full time that entire stretch, but definitely took a ton of hours and effort and labor. But like I was telling you guys before, it was just such a joyful grind, a labor of love, a passion project, and means so much to me that I was finally able to get it done and on my terms for the most part.
That's a big deal. You don't often get
Yeah.
those privileges,
I
is
know,
to
and
say,
I'm
no,
really
this is
grateful too. I had a lot of help and support around me too, to
that's
help me make that happen.
that's really cool.
Well,
Yeah.
and one thing I noticed too is it's super thorough. Like, your works cited is what, like 20 pages? Like,
Hmm.
Hmm. That's
that
the
was always the
journalist.
part. I was gonna say, that was the part that I always failed on papers in high school, because, like, I'm not making this stuff up. Just trust me on it, right? Like,
Yeah.
I've never seen a works cited that's that many pages.
Yeah.
It's
Like,
also
how did you track that?
there's so many things that honestly, if I write a second book, and I hope I can, I am going to be more organized from the very beginning because, to be completely honest, there was a little bit of scrambling at the end, or a lot of scrambling um, after the fact to try to reverse engineer which sources I used,
Hmm.
because some of these things, information that I pull online, are many places. It's just breaking news elements, and Yahoo, ESPN, all kinds of outlets wrote about it, CBS Sports, etc. So part of it was trying to have a balance, a good cross section of sources, but also I bookmarked a ton of stuff, and I had a document that was, I don't even know how many pages long, dozens of pages long, where it's just copy and pasted different links, and it would just have a brief description of what it was, and then as a reminder, when I was filling out the bibliography or works cited, I would open it in a new tab and then just have all these tabs open and just try to just skim basically. And if I had
Yeah.
four of the same information, I'd maybe use only one of the sources. But yeah, it was an interesting process, but definitely had to make sure that I cited my sources, because that didn't all come from my head and my reporting. There's a lot of research involved too. There's a
Yeah.
book too that was extremely helpful on the earthquake and tsunami and recovery efforts. So I got a lot of non-baseball stuff from that one. I
That's
edited
awesome.
by, I think, Jeff Kingston. It was a really good book, and it was recommended by me originally by my Japanese politics professor who I had. So I was a political science major at UC Davis, and that was one of my favorite politics classes, Japanese politics. And he's also a big baseball fan, and he ended up reading this and writing a blurb, and so that was a pleasure to get him involved and let him know. I actually did read that book that you recommended, and I relied upon it heavily for those middle chapters, especially the second of the two, because the first was more anecdotal, where we were following the ensemble cast, where they were when the earthquake hit and how they were getting back in touch with their loved ones and stuff like that. The second chapter was more on a macro level, things like what the government and media are saying, and protests going on against nuclear energy and stuff like that.
I always find that baseball stories are about a lot more than just the game or even just
Mhm.
the people involved. There's so much
Yeah.
context that's external, and I think you've done a really good job of bringing those things together in here. How did you cherry pick or decide which sort of contextual pieces were relevant?
Yeah, that's a great question, because to be completely honest with both of you, the book was really long and way longer. I mean, some people would say it's long now, but it was way longer. And um, I find so many things fascinating, but I had to be honest with myself and take a step back and ask what was best serving the narrative, as opposed to what was serving my ego, or what was
Mhm.
something that only I would notice if I cut it, as opposed to the typical reader. Um, to give you an example, there's this guy, Yuhei Takai, who was a two-way, it wasn't a two-way player. He started out as a left-handed pitcher. He ended up going by Yuhei, just draw. He's like Madonna over it. No, I'm just kidding. But he got rid of he got rid of the Takai part. The catcher, Yuhei Nakamura, and then he was a left-handed pitcher, young phenom. I liken him to Rick Ankiel, where he
Mm.
had some really good stuff, but he had a case of the yips, and it got worse and worse in the minors, and they converted him to a power hitter, and he became a really solid contributor to many of their teams, including the one that went to the Japan series. And I had a lot of really specific, in the weeds, nerdy stuff about his transition into being a power hitter, and it was a little bit tangential, I felt like. And that's an example of something that I had to cut. And so there's a little bit of that still in there, but not anything that specific. And I wasn't able to talk with him, so it didn't really make sense. It didn't really serve the purposes of the book. But I love how you put that about baseball authors and baseball stories, and how a lot of times it's about much more than baseball. And I think us baseball fans, we have so many other interests, and not to knock other sports, but I just think we're complex beings, and we baseball oftentimes is a lens through which you can tell more important stories. Baseball is amazing. It's inspirational. It builds character, but I just think in a vacuum, it's just a game. But it's what you
Mhm.
get out of it, and it's how it brings people together, and that I think really is where the value is derived from it. And so that's kind of, in a nutshell, why it was so important for me to spend time on the earthquake and tsunami and the country's recovery efforts, because that's a life and death thing. And um,
Yeah.
people people lost loved ones, they lost friends and family, and baseball helped them heal, and it was a distraction, but it also it's also just a game. And so that's why I wanted to talk about the more weighty, important things that were going on at the time. And how another thing I wanted to talk about was the women's soccer team, how they inspired the nation at such a critical time, beating the Americans. And I loved that little anecdote where I could talk about another sport and talk about the women, and just how they helped inspire the nation. But yeah, there were a lot of things I just found so fascinating. How the Central League, led by the Yomiuri Giants owner, he really was pushing hard to just return to play immediately. And a lot of players and members of the general public felt like that wasn't right. Like
Yeah.
we've just experienced this massive tragedy, and it's just a game. Let's wait a second. It will help us distract and heal, like 9/11 with returning to baseball and NFL, but not yet. There were energy issues. A couple stadiums were damaged. We have to make sure that people have water and power, and the basic necessities are handled before we get back to this fun game that grown men are lucky enough to play for a living. So,
Yeah. Well said.
thank you.
I like how you talked about like the human element of it all, right? That it's baseball is a fun game, but there's the heaviness to it. And really early on, you established that with Tony having to make the decision to go to Japan, that like he's got this life in Arizona with his girlfriend, and he's like, I've got this opportunity. Like, am I chasing the money? Am I chasing the dream? Right? Like, I thought that was really valid, and I love the way you outlined that. Was there anything else in there as far as that, like any of the other decisions that he made that you're kind of like, man, that's like way heavier than I thought it was going to be for him? Because I was shocked. For me, it was almost like professional baseball here or professional baseball in Japan. Japan's a bigger stage than AAA Reno, right? Like for me, that'd be a no-brainer. But there was so much more that went into it.
Yeah, well, just going more into that particular decision, he really did wrestle with it. I love the imagery evoked by his then girlfriend's quote, Hillary, where then they got married, of course, and were together for a very long time. She said he was on the floor when she got back from, I forgot if it was her final, or I think she might have taken a final because it was, I believe, December.
I think that's what it said. Yeah, was that she had come
Yeah.
one of the finals.
Yeah, and he was just on the floor, and she could see that he just had so much stress just in his face, but she felt like he had finally made a decision. And the salary was a huge pull. I was looking at it earlier before our interview, and I made a note. 26 times the annual salary before taxes were taken out. He was making $2,100 per month at Reno, and the contract was about $500,000 that he was offered to play for the Swallows that first season. But being in the majors was his lifelong dream, and the out of sight, out of mind thing, it's a real thing. And it's changed a little bit in recent years, but it's the thing where it's a lot harder to get scouted and noticed if you're an American or non-Japanese player in Japan, unless your stats just jump off the page and you just absolutely dominate, which is what he did in 2015 and allowed for that opportunity to come to the majors and play for the Rangers. He was pretty good in 2012 too, but then he suffered those significant injuries in years 4 and 5 of his Japanese experience. But it's tough. It's tough. And he'll admit he was a little naive and arrogant about it, and kind of thought after he made the decision, even though he came to terms with being okay with it, if he never ended up getting to the majors, he really was confident in himself and felt like, okay, maybe I'll go for a year or two. But I don't think he didn't remotely imagine being there for 6 years and having to be on the wrong side of 30 when he ultimately got that long awaited opportunity. So It was a tricky thing. The odds were not necessarily in his favor. Only about 20 to 25% of Gaijin that go there are able to come back. And it's even lower if you go with no major league experience at all, which is what his situation was. So it was a very weighty decision. And Hillary, as supportive as she was, it was going to be his decision. He could talk to all the experts in the world, and he did talk to a lot of people who really knew what they were talking about and had been through similar experiences. But ultimately, it was going to be his decision and his alone. And he was going to have to be okay with it and not regret it if the odds ended up what were mostly expected, which is he maybe would have done okay, but not had the opportunity ever to get back to the US to continue his professional playing career. And luckily it worked out for him. He just worked so hard and made sure that it happened, but it was far from a given and really not an easy one, even though I know at 26 you see that money and it's very attractive, but he was on the cusp. He was going to be a non-roster invitee to spring camp. Probably wouldn't have made the opening day roster for the Diamondbacks, but it was pretty likely that anytime a starting pitcher went down, he was going to fill in as a spot starter. And there was still, it wasn't a universal DH then. So pinch hitters were still in demand way more than they are now. And so what really could have happened was he filled in for a starter and then been demoted the next day or later that day.
Yeah. Well, and I love. I'm sure he totally had that attitude, like just go over there, make some money, and just dominate. Because we talked to somebody a few weeks ago who went and played. Was it the Netherlands? Dave played in Brig.
Yeah, Netherlands,
right?
France, and then
But specifically when he went
Taiwan.
to the Netherlands, though, specifically when he went to the Netherlands, though, he's like, yeah, I'll just go over there and rake. And he's like, but I had the exact same problems over there as I had over here because it's way more competitive than I expected it to be. And I think that's one thing that as Americans growing up with Major League Baseball and even minor league baseball, we discount the NPB just a little bit, right? We forget that that's 4A baseball over there. That's legitimate professional baseball. That like the next step from there is here. It's not the minor leagues, right?
It's an excellent point. And some people do Gaijin come in. And I don't want to say Tony was overconfident when he came in, but there is sometimes you don't realize there's going to be a major adjustment period, both on and off the field. There are a lot of language and cultural elements you have to adjust to as well. And in Tony's case in particular, his struggles on the mound made stuff off the field way worse. He just felt more isolated and alienated and like why am I here if I'm pitching so horribly? And it just magnified the discomfort away from the field. And that was Hillary, to her credit, she hurried up and missed her Arizona State graduation to rush to be by his side. And so that was, I believe, in mid-May. So he wasn't fortunately by himself that long, but still spring training in Okinawa is February. So that's still a number of months where this is your first major international experience. He hadn't been outside of North America and as a kid prior to this experience, and only for travel ball he had played in Canada and Mexico, but he had never traveled internationally otherwise. And so it was a shock to the system, and he really had to adjust to the strike zone in Japan. If you look at the numbers, they were not good for him that first season. Two particular teams, the Hanshin Tigers and Yomiuri Giants, particularly victimized him. If it's a weird thing because there are only 6 teams in the Central League and 6 in the Pacific League. So you play each of those 5 teams so often. So if they have your number, you're not able to adjust, you're in trouble. So I did the split stats for against the Hanshin Tigers and Yomiuri Giants versus everyone else. And his ERA was pretty respectable against the other teams, but it didn't matter because he played Hanshin and Yomiuri combined 40% of his starts.
Oh,
Oh
So
my
it's
gosh.
like, okay,
That
great. I have to
was
face these guys again. Alex
oh no.
Ramirez hitting home runs off him left and right, giving up. I think he gave up 9 runs in the first 3 innings, one start against them, or 2 or 3 innings or something. 5-run first inning. It's like, welcome to NPB. You're
Wow.
this American who thinks you'll come in and dominate. Well, not quite. It's going to take
Yeah,
a learning curve here to adjust, and it definitely humbled him a little bit. Like I said, he wasn't arrogant coming in, but it was. I think it was good for him to take his lumps, adjust. The scouting reports can only help so much. He read them, he was aware of them. He talked with the
Mhm.
pitching coach and the catcher beforehand, but you just you need more time. And he developed a cutter that ended up being devastating to opposing hitters, integrated a splitter that was really effective, added a couple Japanese touches to his delivery. He had a pause in the delivery
Mhm.
at its peak where his knee would just stay in the air a little bit, which is distinctly Japanese if you look at
for
it. And
sure.
his
Mhm.
out of the stretch, his elbow would protrude into center field, kind of like that,
All the
pointing
way
at the
back.
center fielder. And
Yeah,
just a quirky thing that he ended up keeping it with him when he went to Texas. And so I thought that was pretty
that's
cool
cool.
as well.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Well, Aaron, this has been fabulous, and I want to know like so much more, but that we want to tell our baseball family, but they're gonna have to get the book in order to learn more. Like specifically, why he plunked Albert Pujols. If you want to know the answer to that question, you gotta get into the book, A
That's a good
Baseball
teaser.
Gaijin. Yeah, yeah. Uh, you can get this everywhere, right? Amazon, Barnes and Noble, the whole everything.
Yeah, exactly. So the distributor is Simon and Schuster. So
Yeah,
fortunately, it's available essentially anywhere. It's not in all stores, so but
yeah,
it's really easy. If you do want to pick it up, the physical copy from a bookstore, you would just need to let them know. You just tell them the name of the book, and uh, and then they'll order it in and get it probably within, I don't know, 3 or 4 business days or something like that. And
yeah.
it's easy for them to do. Also, one thing I'm excited about is there's an audio book that I didn't check today, but I don't know if it's out yet. I don't believe it is, but it's available. Um, one so it's available once it's done, and that can be ordered through Amazon, or the publisher's website, um,
Awesome.
through Skyhorse. I'm gonna check right now
Yeah, you
if
should
it
check. That's
is.
great.
It
I see
is.
it
It says
on it's
available upon
available
release, right?
for pre-order on Audible. Is where I have it.
Okay, cool.
Listen,
So quick
813.
quick thing
cool.
about that really fast. So Brian
Yeah,
Nishi, this Japanese American narrator, he's also an actor. We were able to choose him to do it, and I'm just so excited. I've heard some of his previous work, and he's done baseball books previously, and he's a really charismatic guy. So I think he'll do the book justice, and I'm excited for that because I know I've talked to a lot of people, and people like to drive and listen to stuff. I'm a little bit different. I like a physical book. I like to turn the pages. Yeah,
oh,
that's you.
I'm an
Is you,
equal
bro?
opportunity consumer. I've got
Okay,
my
great.
Kindle, I've got physical
Yeah,
copies, and I've got my
nice.
headphones in 24/7,
Are you a
just
little
in case.
more old school, Brad, like me,
I
or do you like
prefer to see the
ebooks?
words. Prefer to see the
Yeah.
words. I don't want somebody telling me a story unless I'm reading it.
Yeah,
Because
I like to flip back if there's something I missed and really go at
Yeah,
my own pace. And so that's how I
yeah.
consume books. And I've
Mhm.
been really busy, but I'm starting to read again, and I'm really enjoying it.
that's
Yeah,
really
I
cool.
get that. I went a while without it myself, and I'm getting back into the
Hmm.
last couple of years, and I'm exactly the same way. I prefer to be able to flip back. I find myself zoning out with audiobooks. And so I miss like
Yeah.
the
It can be
15 minutes of fun.
meditative if you're just on a really long drive.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I listen
Yeah,
to podcasts, but yeah, not really books when I'm driving.
yeah,
No,
that's how I am too.
I always have one physical copy that I'm earnestly reading. I've got my
Hmm.
Kindle next to my bed because it's got the light and it won't wake up her. and I have stuff I read to go to bed. And then all throughout the day, I've got an audiobook in, so I can walk the dog, I can clean the house, I can take care of the kids, I can do whatever I'm doing. So I always
That's
have 3 books going at the same time. It's pretty intense.
Yep.
Yeah. I do that too
Well,
usually with a couple where I rotate back and
Yeah.
forth. Really whatever I'm enjoying more, I'll end up spending more time. But it's nice to have a break sometimes, switch back and forth.
Yeah. Little
Yeah,
palate cleanser.
for sure.
Well, how do
Yeah.
you not be romantic about baseball, right? I mean, this guy's story is romantic, and we can
Yeah.
romanticize it all we want, but baseball family, you ought to go pick this up. A Baseball Gaijin, Chasing a Dream to Japan and Back by our guest, Aaron Fischman. He's now a friend of the podcast, and we're really happy to have you with us. Thank you for coming on, and we should have you on
I
again.
loved
This
it.
was
I
delightful.
would love to. Thank you. I would love to do it again. So fun and entertaining, and you guys ask the best questions. It's so rewarding for me to talk with people who've read the book, who've enjoyed it, and everyone is different. So it's really fascinating for me to listen and hear what specific things resonated with the particular interviewer. And as I keep saying, I love nerding out on this stuff, and I know you guys do too. So let's definitely do this
Yeah, we
again
do.
sometime.
Yeah, let's do it.
For
That
sure.
sounds awesome. All right, baseball family, we'll take a quick break and then we'll let you go, but stay with us for just one more minute.
Welcome back, baseball family. Thank you so much for joining us for that fantastic conversation with Aaron Fischman. We had a lot of fun talking to him. I actually got to spend a lot of extra time with him. Brig had to leave, but he and I sat and we chatted for quite a while after this thing was over. And it was a lot of fun, a lot of really interesting things to talk about. If you want to catch that part of the conversation, you can head over to patreon.com and search Baseball Together. Become one of our rooters, become a patron. You support the show, and everybody gets the bullpen cut of all of our ball talk conversations. We get it's really funny because Brig, we get a lot of really good stuff, a lot of really good stories during, but then something sparks a story after when we're talking. It's like, oh my gosh, that's freaking hilarious, right?
Every time.
It happens all the time, and you can get those over on Patreon. Another way you can support the show is by heading to chinookseedery.com. Get yourself the best seeds ever. Use code BTPOD at checkout to save 10% on your order. You will support the show and support your mouth all at the same time. Don't forget to like, subscribe, rate, and review everywhere that you can, especially on YouTube. That is where most of our efforts go. We are a video-first podcast, if you will. So if you can support the show, especially on YouTube, that's fantastic. We really appreciate that, and that does more for us than you know. Baseball family, thank you again for joining us for Ball Talk. We will catch you next week.